In a sec, I'm going to hand over to Oliver Greaves, who will explain a bit more formally what is the Bridge Street Fellowship and why we meet, and also to introduce our special guest, James Bartle. Then after I interview James, you'll have the opportunity to participate and ask your questions. And the way we do that is to use the raised hand function in Zoom, and then you'll be asked to unmute and you can ask your question directly of James. We'll go all the way through to 8:30 when we'll close then, and Al will give a short prayer. So that's where we're heading. So thank you again for joining, and I'm going to pass over to Oliver.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you're feeling well and looking forward to the weekend. Personally, I'm recovering a little bit from last night's golf celebration at the Church by the Bridge. This is the last meeting before Christmas. And so I think it's a very special meeting, especially since, as Peter said, we've been going through these Zoom times together. I'd particularly like to welcome everybody, and particularly those who've come for the first time today and are asking themselves a bit about what the Bridge Street Fellowship is all about. And I'd just like to make a few remarks along those lines, as I usually do. First of all, who are we? Well, as our fellowship name suggests, we're a group of friends. And we see ourselves as on a journey of life, exploring and experiencing together our faith in God as we go. Not everybody here has a faith. Some people are just exploring, but that's fine. And we welcome you to do the same. We explore our faith and our thoughts about how our faith influences our life, our families, our work relationships. And we also, I think, can be vulnerable with each other, which is pretty rare these days. And we share these in small group meetings where we explore our vulnerabilities with, I like to believe, a lot of humor and integrity. So welcome, and we just do hope that you'll get on board with us and enjoy this meeting, and perhaps this will be the first of many occasions in the future. So I'd just like to welcome our speaker today, James Bartle, who's the Chief Executive of Outland Denim. And you know, in addition to the notes that we had in our invitation of him being a former welder and motocross rider, I was trying to figure whether these two skills actually come together in making jeans. James has developed a wonderful company with a purpose, with a mission to support women caught in slavery and to make sure that people who work for the company are looked after and treated well and find some economic support for their lives. And I know he's going to tell us more about that, but I'd just like to quote from his company's website. He says on here, being a stubborn kind of bloke, James presses on, because sometimes you have to be a Robin Hood in a land of thieves, the last biscuit in a cookie jar, or the sun breaking through on an overcast day. He has an enduring penchant for good jeans and a cowboy heartbeat, eventually culminated in the growing collection of effortless, timeless, and coveted denim that you see here today. I'd like to quote a few other things as well about Meghan Markle, that I'll leave that for James. Anyway, thank you very much for coming today, James. We look forward to what you're saying. And back to you, Peter.
Thanks, Oliver. Yeah, and good morning, James. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for the introduction, Oliver and Peter and everybody for having me this morning.
So you're joining us from the hinterland behind the Gold Coast. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah. We're in a little place called Tambourine Mountain, which is in the Gold Coast hinterland, yeah.
Yeah, at 6:30 your time. So thank you for getting up nice and early.
No, that's no worries.
Well, it's a bit of an unusual place to seek to sort of headquarter a international fashion house. Why Tambourine?
Well, for starters, I live here, and I think this is like the center of Australia here. It's a really beautiful little spot. Within an hour of either direction, north or south, at an international airport. But I'm also not stuck in the hub of any of the fashion hubs. I'm not influenced by the way it's done because my neighbors are in the same industry. And I think there's a real advantage to that when you're trying to be not disruptive for the sake of being disruptive, but disruptive because it's required to change an industry, which is actually pretty abhorrent in the way it conducts itself.
Mm-hmm. And your real activities are happening over in Cambodia, I understand. Give us a sense for, just paint a picture of what's happening over there, what you're doing, the scale and nature of your work.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we've got 2 production facilities in Cambodia, and those facilities are made up of around 130 predominantly women who have come from a range of different backgrounds. Often they've come from a background of being exploited. They may have been a slave in a garment factory. They may have been sold into or forced into a range of other exploitive industries. And our job is to then be able to create safe workspaces for them and then to equip them with everything they need to be really successful and independent. So they won't be dependent upon us or any charity, that they will become people in their community that become, I guess, the change makers. And so we're split up with one production facility in the capital city, Phnom Penh, and then the other one in a city called Kampong Cham, which is out in more of a rural province. And the reason we do that is so that women don't have to leave their families to go to work. They can enjoy the lifestyle that probably we all get to enjoy, where we can go home after work and spend time with our families and look after our kids. And so it's been quite strategic in the way that we have set those up. And then we've seen the long-term impact of that over the past 10 years of being able to really encourage that family living and that family life.
And we're going to hear from one of your workers.
My life before Outland, it was very hard. My life have changed after I work with Outland Denim because I can earn much more money to support my family, and especially we can live together as a family. I have a lot of friends who love me and cares about me, and everyone in the company help each other and encourage each other, never judge people, and I am so happy working with Outland. And Outland Denim provide education so I can learn English and Khmer. I am working with Outland and I have no worry about financial because I think that me and my husband can provide my son to finish school in the future. The training is helpful for me is financial management, so I can manage my money very well after I got the workshop from Outland Denim. And now I know how to spend money and know how to save money for a big dream in the future. Thank you so much to all the customers who buy our product from Outland Denim. Without you, we cannot continue my job. So this is really mean to us and everyone working with Outland so much. We are really appreciate for your love and support Outland Denim. Thank you so much.
That certainly must warm your heart, James. I'm sure you've seen that thousands of times. But yeah, what are you feeling when you watch that?
Well, to be honest, I haven't watched that too many times.
Oh, really?
And so I was just having a few deep breaths before you asked me to talk again. And but I'm really proud of, you know, the idea that it's ultimately, it's not just myself and my team here. It's a real genuine community that come together for this to happen. It doesn't happen without people buying our product. And, you know, trying to sell a $200 pair of jeans to somebody who already knows what jeans they love and wear isn't easy. And it takes for people to really take a risk on us. And that's how the change really happens.
Mm-hmm. And you really got a sense from that about the holistic care, teaching about financial management. She mentioned her husband, her son finishing his education, which underscored what you said earlier about impacting more than just the person, but the area.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
So we're going to dive more into that story. So I wanted to kind of paint the picture first, but give us a sense for what sort of scale of a problem are we talking about here worldwide with human trafficking, particularly women?
Yeah, look, this is a huge problem. It's a $150 billion industry, and the latest statistics would say that there's 40 odd million slaves in the world today. So it's a bigger problem than it's ever been any other time in history. I think the most harrowing way I can describe this to you by way of scale is that every 1 in 130 women on the face of this planet is enslaved. If you let that sink in for a second, statistically speaking, we would all be able to say that we know a number of slaves. And might surprise you, but Australia has not escaped this issue. Every corner of the world hosts slaves. And this can be right under our nose. The agricultural sector can have it, and domestic servitude and a range of other things, the sex industry. And we probably a lot of the time unknowingly partake in supporting the industry. And we do that through the kinds of products that we buy, always looking for the cheapest product. The cheapest product is always got to be paid for by somebody, and the reality is it's often those most vulnerable people around the world. So the issue is big, and in my opinion, this is one of the greatest issues we face. And I think I'll just make one statement that really connects this to the environmental challenges we face. And when I speak about the environmental challenges, I'm not really, I don't really care if people think that the world's going to implode into flames or not. I don't care. What I do care about, though, is that we do live on this epic planet, and it is beautiful. And we should look after it the best that we can, and we should use technology to do that and better practices within industry. There's an incredible guy, and in fact, he'd probably be the world's leading modern slavery expert. His name is Kevin Bales, and he works at the University of Nottingham for the Rights Lab there. And he did some research and study, and he said if slavery were a country, they would be the third largest emitter of CO2 right behind China and the USA. And so it makes it really clear as to this issue of slavery being so important for us all if we really want to combat any of the environmental degradation issues that we're talking about, or just the social injustice that many of us mightn't even know much about. Then first we must attack this thing called slavery. And to attack that, we've got to go at poverty, because poverty is the thing that underwrites all of this, is making people vulnerable. And when people are vulnerable, they're forced into these situations where they're taken advantage of and end up as slaves.
Thank you, James. Well, let's wind the clock back, though, 10 years or so. As Oliver said in the introduction, you're forging a career or seeking to forge a career in motocross. And you really had no idea, I gather, about this whole issue. So what led to the change? What was the catalyst for you?
Yeah, look, well, it actually started at the movies with my wife one night. We went to watch the movie Taken. Hero in the movie was Liam Neeson. Most of you guys have probably seen it, and if you haven't, I reckon you should go and watch it. It's a fictional film, but in the film, Liam Neeson, his daughter and friend were traveling through Europe and were abducted and sold into the sex industry. Now, Liam, as he does in most of his movies, he finds a way to save the day. But at the end of the film, it had some script that came up and said that these events still happen around the world. And, I'll never forget, I can still picture walking down the exact part of road that I was walking on with my wife and 2 friends. And I was so angry, and I just wanted to go and kill all of these bad guys that would do such things. And I said, I'm going to start some kind of vigilante. This is what we need to do, and we need to eradicate these bad people. My wife was really quick to remind me I don't have the same combat skills that Liam Neeson might have, and that it was important we look for a different solution than that. And my wife's a very smart, intelligent woman, and she's a journalist by trade. And she continued to research and filter information through to me over the coming 2 years. And, as you learn more just about the scale of this issue and the people that it's impacting, it's very hard to not be persuaded to want to be a part of something. But as you said, I was riding as a motocross rider and trying to make a career out of that. Well, actually, I just quit racing motocross and moved to freestyle motocross, which means rather than racing, I was going to events and doing a performance with other riders and doing tricks. And I was at one particular event, and there was an agency there looking for ambassadors and supporters of the work they did. And this agency specialized in the identification and rescue of young women that had been exploited and sold. And so when I was offered the opportunity to travel to Southeast Asia with them and see what this issue really looked like on the ground, I accepted the invitation. And, you know, it was a moment that has completely changed my life. We landed in Bangkok and traveled out to Pattaya, and there's a place there called Walking Street, which they tell me is the sex capital of the world. And as we started walking down the street just to see what was going on, keep in mind, I've got friends that would have used these services in the past. You know, I'd seen it in King's Cross. You know, it wasn't that, you know, as crazy as I expected it to be. And, you know, everybody looked happy. And I said to the guy, I said, I understand this isn't ideal, but isn't this better than what waits for them otherwise? Like, isn't this better than poverty? At least they can feed their families and they look happy. And he said, oh, James, I'll take you a bit further. And we walked out of the main tourist area, and we got toward the end. It was a little bit darker and a little bit shadier of character that you'd see there. And you could feel a bit of weight, you know, as you walked further. And I could see up on my right-hand side, there was a lineup of ladies. And as we got closer, I could see that one of them was really scared. And as we got closer again, you could tell that she was really young. And I said to him, what about this girl? This is just a little girl. And he said, yeah, she's probably only 12 or 13 years old. And I said, well, what are we going to do for her? And he said, James, if you look around, these little girls are everywhere. And, you know, it's that moment that you stop and you realize, I mean, I had 2 nieces of my own at the time. I now have 2 daughters and a son. And there's nothing that I wouldn't do for my nieces or my own children. And I wondered where this little girl's dad was, or where was her uncle looking for her. And I started to learn that this issue was so dire for so many families, this issue of poverty, that families in some circumstances even had to make a decision of which child they'd sacrifice to go into an industry like this and then be owned by a brothel, you know, so that they could send just this little bit of money home. You know, and probably most of us are parents or, you know young children, and you think about the hell that they've literally got to live in order to fund a family to survive. And it's when you realize that this issue is rooted in poverty that you realize that the solution has to be an economic one. And that's what led us to starting Outland Denim.
Wow. So really very personal, very moving stories. But you painted the picture of this 1 in 130 women, so a huge problem. Didn't you feel like, you know, what difference could I make? Like, I'm just one person. Didn't you feel just totally inadequate?
Yeah, not in that moment. No, not in that moment, because I saw that girl, and, you know, I can still picture her face. And when I do talks like this, I try not to let her face enter my brain too much, because it was such a powerful moment. Having told the story thousands of times, I can't picture her without feeling really emotional, because, you know, the fear was just so real in her eyes, and how intimidated she was. And, you know, we all connect because we know these young kids in our own lives. And, you know, so for me, I would say that was a real gift. I thank God that I saw that, because it's been really difficult to want to continue on this journey a lot of the time. But whenever I picture her, or now picture any of these young women and their children who work for us and with us, it's the motivator to keep going and fight for something that I believe can be changed. And I actually believe we're at a very unique time in history where we have enough awareness in community that challenging things like poverty is a possibility. And I don't know if there's been another time in modern history where we could have said that, because the awareness wasn't there. But what I do have faith in is that most human values are similar. Most of us would never want another human being to have to go through what these enslaved people go through. And so because of that, I believe that there is a real unique opportunity in front of us right now.
Mm-hmm. So how did you channel that drive then? So tell us the story. How did you actually get to the point of having Outland Denim?
Well, I'm not a very educated guy. I only went to the end of grade 9. And so therefore, probably didn't learn all the critical thinking skills that you guys on this screen would have learned, and therefore didn't think a whole lot about it and just plowed on ahead and went, I have to do something. Before I left Cambodia, so we went from Thailand to Cambodia. And when we got to Cambodia, we saw the need was just so much more. I mean, there was only probably 30 odd years earlier from my trip that the genocide, the Pol Pot regime had gone through and killed so many people. And it was a very young population there, and such great need. So before I left Cambodia, I committed to the leader of an NGO there that I will commit to paying 2 young ladies that want to learn to sew. And let's start. And we started, I came straight home and started a welding business. I just started on my own, borrowing gear to begin with, and making metal contraptions. And I did that because I learned to weld making ramps for motorbikes, and it was incredible. Work just started coming. I mean, people were ringing, can you make this trailer? Can you fix this bucket on a excavator? Or, amazing things. And so that helped fund this to continue on. And I had amazing people in the community donating. It was set up as a not-for-profit at the time. And, we'd go down to the local IGA literally and sell sausages. It was very bootstrap operation. And we grew that over 6 years. And that the intention was to be able to prove, does this have the impact on people's lives that we dream it would? And to be honest, there was a lot of learnings in there about and wrong turns and wrong moves and mistakes and failures all through those 6 years of what didn't really equip people well. Because when we started, I started with probably quite a traditional charity mindset, which was those poor things. We must do something to save them. And in fact, that's where the problem lay. We must do something to save them, those poor things. And I realized that I was treating them with pity and that I wanted to save them. And in fact, if they really were going to be saved, it wasn't going to come from me saving them. It was going to come from them having opportunities like I got, to be able to forge a much brighter future for themselves. And so we really started to adapt our business model to equip them with everything they need. And so you saw in that video that it's about financial training. It's about Khmer literacy, so they can read and write, and all these things that, we just take for granted in a country like Australia a lot of the time, because it's just normal. It's what you'd expect, right? It's just a basic human right to be educated and to be able to, enjoy a life where you can have healthcare and care, have an education. But it's not like that for these people. So the starting point was very raw. Eventually, we switched to a for-profit model, and I would say that is the best decision that we ever made.
Mm-hmm. So you supported the operations over there through your own work. And then it eventually got to the point, I think you launched Outland Denim, you said in 2016.
Correct, yes.
And from 2 seamstresses to, as you say, 130 people now. That's
right, yeah. And look, I'd still classify ourselves as just a pilot. We're a proof of concept. The vision is not to just help 150 people, though we can track the impact of this goes, if you can help this 130, we've been able to track it into helping about 750 people. And so it's proven that it's the way to combat things like poverty. But this is just very small scale, and it's about perfecting the model to scale it. And the dream would be to scale this into many countries in the world, and to be able to flow it into manufacturing for other brands. We already produce for 3 other big brands. And, that's really where the impact happens, not just through our own brand, but through their brands, and using the influence they have in their communities, and the money that's being spent by their community on helping these young ladies.
You mentioned the shift at one point from sort of charity to for profit. So tell us a little bit more. What is your business model? How do you achieve the social outcomes as well as the desire to sort of make this profitable? And I guess, who are now your investors?
Yeah, look, as a not-for-profit, we always had our hand out looking for the capital to get going. And so you've got a few options. You've got, donations, and you've got grants, and then you've obviously got commerce and creating those that revenue. But to create that revenue, you really need one of those first two things first. You need someone to donate you some money, which we were getting, but very small scale into what you need. I mean, you need millions of dollars to invest into this, not thousands. And so I got to a point where, I'd nearly run my welding business. I'd grown it to have about, I think we had about 6 guys working at that point in time. And I was just running it into the ground. I was working all the time, and my marriage was suffering because I didn't have another choice but to work all the time, because I had committed to making sure that these people would be paid next week. And so it was always the fear of, what if I can't pay next week? And there was many times where it was down to the day. But I got to the point where I couldn't go any further. And I went to a couple of stakeholders and I said, I want to go to a for-profit model. And the reason is I want to be able to bring in large amounts of capital to be able to scale this and build it into something that's lasting and could potentially grow to help millions of people. Anyway, that took a little while. I got the blessing. One guy had given me 20 grand in the past, and I wanted his blessing because he'd given me a large amount of money. And his response to it was, James, you should have done that in the beginning. He said, the difference between what you do and what I do? He goes, you give my money away, but you know what I do? I give my money away. And it was really quite profound to me, to be honest. And it was like, wow, I'm asking, yes, I'm giving my money away as well, but I'm also asking you for yours, and I'm giving it away. How much better would it be if it was just, those in the business were giving our money away to do this? And so it was a really cool sort of concept that I hadn't really thought through much before. And we moved to a for-profit model, and he became our first investor and invested a huge amount of money in the first hit. And that really led us on this trajectory of raising capital. And we haven't raised huge amounts of capital, but to date, we've probably raised about $10 million. That's helped us set this up. But we're competing against brands that are putting in literally like 150 million US dollars into a startup, and they're our competitors. But we are competitive with this, and we've been able to set 2 businesses up off that amount of money as well, a manufacturing business and a brand, and along with other things that I might share with you as we go. But what it highlighted to me is that, yes, money's very important in startup world. Absolutely. Like, it's up there with oxygen. But I tell you what is also really, really powerful is purpose, is having something that you're fighting for, which is more than just profits. And that has been what I would say is one of the superpowers behind our business. There is no option for us to fail, because the consequence of failure is something that I dread the thought of, imagining what would happen to those people whom we started this for. And so many other businesses don't have that. So I'd say we're very, very lucky to have that underpinning everything that we do.
Mm. Now, there's another dimension to your story that we haven't really touched on, and that is your faith. Now, you grew up as the son of a pastor, but I understand this really didn't come easily to you, this concept of belief. So join some of the dots there for us as well, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, like you said, I grew up as a pastor's kid, and I don't know if any of you know any pastor's kids, but often they're a little bit challenged in the faith area. And the reason they're challenged in the faith area, I think, is because they've grown up just seeing people. They've grown up seeing broken people all the time, because often pastors attract that's what they want to do, is they want to find the broken people and they want to work with them and love them and care for them. But as the kid, you're just seeing that. And you go, you know what? I don't know if this thing could possibly be real. To be honest, it sounded like a fairy tale. And I know it does to a huge amount of the population. It sounds like a fairy tale. But I had been taught about it, and I knew it in theory, what this Christian faith supposedly looked like. I just never really experienced it. I was actually at a race, and one Saturday night, actually my dad was at the race with me, and I think I was around maybe 20 or so. And I had one of my childhood heroes at the race. He was in the class. I'd finally made it to being a pro, and his name was Peter Melton, and I knew I could beat him. I was faster on this track, and the first race started, and the gates dropped, and I got a bad start. And so there's 40 riders on the starting gate, and if you get a bad start, it's hard to make your way through the pack to get to the front. And he was out front, and I could see him, and I was in about sixth spot, and I came around and I hit this double jump, and that's the last thing I remember. I woke up in the back of an ambulance, and I was overcome with fear. And the reason I was overcome with fear is I thought that maybe these were my last moments, because my head felt like it was going to explode. Little did I know it was just concussion, but it drove me to ask this potential God. I guess there's a chance he's real. And if he is real, then I'm quite concerned about what fate I have. And so I just said, God, I don't know if you're real, but if you are, I ask that you show me you're real, and then I'll serve you with my life. And I left hospital that night. I continued to pray that prayer for 3 years, just sporadically. It wasn't on my knees. I was just talking, just God. As I'd go about my day, every now and again, I'd remember, if you're real, show me. And if you are real, I'll serve you with my life. And 3 years later, I had the most miraculous encounter with the Holy Spirit, and that was a game changer for me, and that has led and underpinned my life ever since. And the reason it underpins my life is because it's given my life absolute direction and purpose that I never had before. Before, my whole dream was to be a motocross racer, and all of a sudden that felt meaningless to me, and my life took a completely different path.
And do you now see that as you say, that a change, that game changer for you, your faith and desire to serve God? How do you see that playing out now in the work you do at Outland Denim? How do you see the connection?
Look, the connection is it's a worldview. My worldview is so different now on micro things, so the world has told me that I shouldn't have to sacrifice anymore. James, like you should like think about your family. They need a family home, and they need to be able to own. You need to have some security. You need to and like I understand that they want the best for me. I totally get that, but for me, it's underpinned this much deeper thing and going, man, my family home is great, and one day maybe I will have, but this thing that I'm doing is so much more important, because these people will never have a family home. And the family home they will have will literally be nothing like the family home I'd have here in Australia. And so I'm fighting for something much greater, in my opinion, than just providing a family home. Now, again, that's a really noble thing to do, because it's our responsibility to provide for our families. But my idea of what actually providing for my family is just different now. Back then, it would have been, yes, they need the security of a home and a great education. Now it would be, they need the security of knowing God. And I will never push that. I will just live it out and let them make their own choices in all of those things with my kids. But I want them to see that it's actually their responsibility to care for those that are less fortunate than they are. And that's called legacy. And the legacy I want to leave is actually the same one that Jesus left on this earth. And I believe that we as followers of him are able to do the same thing, and hopefully they will remember and see the freedom that comes with just knowing this creator of the universe. It's actually just freedom from all of those things that once probably bound me to a certain idea.
Are you concerned that, as you explained, growing up as a pastor's kid, that you saw, in a sense, the damaged goods that your dad needed to care for? Are you concerned that you might be perpetuating the same thing with your own kids, given the line of work you're doing?
Yeah, all the time. It's a real concern. But I guess there's moments, right before COVID, we spent 3 months as a family doing some projects in Cambodia and with our team there. And my eldest daughter was we were all out for dinner, and we were walking back to our unit, and there was this little girl rummaging through a bin, and my daughter said, "Daddy, why is she doing that?" And I said, "Darling, not every little girl has a house to sleep or has toys even like you have. And it looks like she's looking for food. We've just been out for dinner." And she just sort of stopped and thought, and we hopped in the lift and went up to, in their standards, the palace that we were staying in for 3 months, this beautiful 2-bedroom apartment. And she went and collected all her toys and said, "Daddy, can we go and find that little girl?" And we went back down and we found that little girl, and she gave this little girl all her toys. Now, yes, there is a risk that she will feel the similar things that I felt. But I actually think that what happened for her that night, because she got to actually walk in those shoes and experience the gift of giving. And actually the Bible talks about how it's greater to give than it is to receive. And I believe it with every part of me. I get way more joy if I have the opportunity to give something than I do when I receive something. And she experienced that. I said to my wife, we can't just go and replace the toys tomorrow. We can't do that. We've got to let her feel that part as well. And so she's felt it to where even it's been really challenging on the cash flows of a business like this. And so we're sitting around the dinner table only this week. And I was just talking to my wife about the challenges of cash flow. My little girl who's saving, she wants to buy a horse. And I said, if she can save $1,000, I'll pay the rest and we'll get her a horse. Don't know how yet, but I'm hoping it'd take a bit longer than it is. Anyway, she saved $400 and she goes and gets her money and brings it out and gives it and says, "Here, Dad, you can use this." Now it's fostering something that is far greater, and that's legacy. That's my legacy, my wife's legacy that we can leave, is going and letting her experience it, and then rewarding her for, after she's felt the full gamut of the experience, rewarding her for the beautiful things she's done. And so it is a risk, but I think I'm not witnessing that happen. I'm witnessing something really beautiful happen because they're exposed to the reality. And I guess my exposure was just slightly different to what hers is.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're doing a remarkable job with raising your kids there, James. We're going to invite the men to ask questions in just a moment. I've just got one eye on the clock there. So do please use the raised hand function if you've got some questions. You used the word risk there at the end. How would you define faith? Do you think risk is a big factor?
Before I knew that this was a reality, yes. Social risk, risk of fun, risk of freedom, risk of I can't go out drinking, risk of, like, it sounded terrible to me, to be perfectly honest. And now, no, the risk is not knowing. Like I think about the challenges that I face in this world, and we all face in this world, and the idea of not knowing the creator of the universe, knowing I can have this relationship, is just scary and risky, in my opinion. I have absolute faith that the freedom that comes from just submitting to God, as scary as it feels, is the only true pathway to freedom. And so I would say it is not risky, but you will be stretched and challenged, and that's good. And you want that. And in fact, none of us ever look back on the challenges we've gone through and go, geez, I wish I never went through that. we get to the end of it and go, man, I'm glad I went through that, because I'm a completely different person today than I was before it. So I think the risk is not knowing God, or not searching him out and finding out whether you really believe it to be a reality.
Thank you, James. Let's turn to some questions from the men, and I'm going to start with Stephen.
Hi. So one of the things that just struck me when you were talking, Simon Sinek in one of his recent videos talks about just cause and legacy. And it seems that that's very much a model that you're undertaking. So well done there. My question, I have a similar passion, and I've gone down the path of supporting kids through organisations like Compassion. What are your thoughts about those? And I mean, my understanding of those is the intention, or why I've chose those, is I'm concerned about children, and the intention is to educate them to the point where they can actually, A, not be sold into slavery and ease the burden on the family, and B, get to a point where they've got an education and can actually earn money. Why didn't you go that path, and what are your thoughts about those sorts of organisations?
Well, I think it takes, thanks for the question, Stephen. I think it takes a lot of different avenues to be able to create a holistic impact. And I think Compassion are a fantastic organisation who do incredible work. And, we also have Compassion Kids. And so I am all for that. I think it is the education, so that, when those kinds of endeavours are supporting that makes a lasting impact. But what I would say about charity is it does create dependency. How much greater is it if mum and dad can afford to educate their children? Because it is mum and dad's responsibility. So it's very hard to have dignity as a parent when you can't afford to take care of the family. And so I would say, yes, Compassion is excellent and important, and aid in countries through crisis is very important. But a sustainable future is going to be bred out of meaningful, secure working conditions and opportunities. And so that's where I believe the future is going to be won in this area. I don't believe it'll be won with just the likes of Compassion and those kinds of organisations, though I believe they're very important.
Question from Stuart.
James, well done on everything you've achieved. I was so impressed. I'm actually going to go and buy a pair of Outland Denim for my wife because I reckon she'd look hot.
Awesome.
But my question is, I move in the church I worship at. They're big on the ethical fashion guide. And it's interesting. While you were speaking, I read an article where you were somewhat critical of the ethical fashion guide. You're saying the bar was too low, even though you like the methodology basically. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I can. That's great. Look, I love Baptist World Aid's Ethical Fashion Report. I love the team and I love everything that they do. I think that they've missed the mark drastically when it comes to the fashion guide. So when a consumer goes and uses it as a guide as what to buy, they've missed the mark. And the reason they've missed the mark is their grading system, which they will grade from an A+, which is the highest grade, all the way down to a fail. There's brands in there that aren't paying a living wage, and that's a basic human right. And some of those brands are scoring with A's. And so for that, I say that it's a completely misleading guide. And therefore it's leading people like myself into this place where I believe I'm part of the solution, yet really I'm not, I'm part of the problem. And so I've actually asked Baptist World Aid to remove the report, and I went public with it. I gave them a few opportunities to remove it and they didn't. And who am I to even ask that? I know, but I still believe that it's that important, because actually this is enforcing these terrible conditions for people that they exist to fight against. And so that's why you read that.
I might just throw in a question there, James, following up on that. Do you see actually a lot of hypocrisy and sort of virtue signaling in the industry, and how do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, it's rife. It is rife with that. I think the way to differentiate yourself is ultimately you need to be trusted. And how do you become trusted? Well, start showing people where you're not very good, where you haven't done a great job. We just released yesterday our report for the last 2021 financial year, and in that report, it talks to the areas that we failed as well. And I think that that's extremely important. It's about moving an industry forward together, hopefully. But when you've got leadership teams within brands that I think have proven over time that their heart is not for people or planet, it is then the next step, in my opinion, is to hope that those businesses fail and that the people who were supported by those businesses are able to be picked up by brands that genuinely care about them. There's harrowing stories, and we've employed people that have come from these garment factories that have been literally taken into other countries as slaves, and their friends die on the floor. And that's what we're talking about. And often we're isolated from the realities of that here in Australia, but this is dire. This is really, really dire. So that's why I'm so passionate, and that's why I spoke out against the report.
A question from Warren.
The response to Peter partly sort of moved into what my question's about. You started the venture because of a concern about modern slavery and addressing that issue. I'd like to sort of unpack the strands of how what you're doing actually impacts that aspect of things. Is it mostly preventative in that you take in people who otherwise may have ended up in a slavery situation, or are you actually taking people who are rescued from slavery or have somehow been in slavery? You hinted in that last response that there may be some element of that, but I'm just wondering what how it all actually works on the slavery front. Purely preventative, or is there a lot more to it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Warren. It's both. We take people that are vulnerable too, and we take people who have been exploited in a range of ways. And in fact, you can see up on the photo up behind me there on the screen, that is the very first young lady that we employed. And if you don't mind, I'll just really quickly tell you her story. But she was sexually exploited, and she came into the care of an NGO. We employed her. And we wanted to track, after a number of years, the impact this kind of employment was having on her life. She was currently living, and had all her life lived under just a plastic sheet with her family, so literally under a tarpaulin. She then went on to tell us that she had been able to build a home for her family. So the home was about a 6 by 6 meter, timber-clad, iron roof home where they all now lived. So in a community where she came from, she believed she had lost dignity because she was sexually exploited, and nobody would ever want a woman like her. She was now somebody who was in her community seen as the breadwinner and the person that was lifting her family out of poverty. And all of a sudden she started to report that she felt like she had dignity again. We did not build that home for her. She came as someone who was enslaved into this opportunity that has created tremendous freedom for her and her family. And then she went on to say that she was also able to buy her sister back from a man that owned her. And so I guess I just want to highlight that too, because that's literally another Liam Neeson movie script right there. But that's everyday reality for enslaved people around the globe. And that's why we're so passionate to make sure that we can offer these kinds of opportunities to the most vulnerable people in the world. And that only is activated by people like yourselves supporting a brand like us or another brand that's doing something great.
A question from David.
Could you explain to me what your long-term ambition for your business model is?
Yeah, long-term ambition is that we create products that activate a cycle of freedom just because the product was created. And we also leave the planet in a healthier position because the product was created. So a lot of what we're working on is around textile waste going into landfill. We've just finished a project where we've now proven in a lab in Spain that we can actually eradicate textiles out of landfill with this technology. And we're looking to scale those things. We're looking for these facilities to be scattered across the world and to license and train other factories and facilities to operate to this standard so that they become this avenue for their staff and their communities to enter this cycle of freedom as well.
Looks like Stephen would like to ask another question.
a little bit of a follow-up on my previous question. I think you make a very, very good point about dignity. Have you thought about partnering with someone like Compassion or other organisations like that that are doing some of the charity work that has to be done, but then helping those people step up to a level of dignity where they're actually paying for their children's education?
We do actually partner with a range of different non-government organisations who specialise in different areas of what we don't do, and we believe that, you know, I wholeheartedly believe that it really is about those kinds of collaborations. They're experts at what they do, and we're experts at what we do, and if we work together, then so yeah, 100%. That's up there, and you know, having this unified approach to the rescue all the way through to watching somebody go out into the rest of their lives with their family. It can't be done by one organisation.
Andrew, a question.
Thanks. Just noting, history of slavery, there's usually a lot of opposition from the people running the slavery and from the current businesses and status quo. I was just wondering what sort of opposition you've had, because you must, as you disrupt the current business model there, which is criminal.
Yeah, it's probably not on the same level as Taken. The opposition that we've faced. There is always opposition, and there's always an element of risk around some of these things. But ultimately, the organisations that specialise in the rescue are the ones that face the majority of this. Our job is then to stay very low key as far as who works with us. And you'll notice in the photo I showed you in the background, you can't see her face. In the video that you watched, you can't see who she is. And that's really, really important to just protect people's identity. I mean, we've got people that have worked with us that have testified in court against, huge criminal rings. And, so you've got to be very careful about the way that you would expose any of those things and protect them. But yeah, look, the opposition is pretty low. You know, the greatest opposition we face is the Western world. The greatest opposition we face is that, well, how on earth could it cost $200 for a pair of jeans? You know, there was a great article written by a media outlet called Refinery 29. It was a few years ago now, but they did a lot of in-depth research into the real cost of a pair of jeans. And what they found by the end of it was, if you went to buy a pair of jeans at retail, if you paid less than $100 for that jean, you could be guaranteed that someone somewhere was paying for it. And, you know, I think that that's a really, really crazy and eye-opening for most of us, because unfortunately fast fashion has really messed with our culture and has a lot to answer for on that cultural level, to where we all believe, probably, myself included, that, oh, well, that's a bit expensive. How can I? And so what we do is we have 5 pairs of jeans. We don't have 1 or 2. And that's just a cycle of the opposite to freedom.
We've sort of reached our time limit, but I will just ask one last question. Obviously, gents, if you can hang around, that would be great. But last question from Guy.
Yeah, thank you. Inspirational. I loved your spirit. I'm involved in setting up a related or similar thing in Indonesia currently. And one of the issues that we seem to strike a lot is the local culture. And we're working with people who are local, but there seems to be a lot of opposition from people who are out for their own benefit, if you like. How did you cope with that in Cambodia?
That is a huge issue, and there's all I can really say to you is embrace their culture. So one of the greatest challenges I found was that as a confident white guy, I had all the confidence in the world to know that I knew the way to do it, you know, and I tried to show them how to do it and the best way to do it. And, you know, a lot of the time the reason I knew the best way was literally because of the way I think, and it wasn't the best way. It was just that I thought I knew the best way. And it wasn't until I started to embrace their culture and their value system that we started to make progress in this area. until that point, it was banging our head against a brick wall because our value system was completely different. Now, our company values can still be the same. Our company values are honesty, integrity, generosity, and others, and theirs can be the same, but we need to understand how that looks in their culture. And so one example would be in Khmer culture and more even so Asian culture, saving face might be a term you've heard, but Guy, if you had told me a white lie then, in our culture, I'd go, Guy, that's not true, mate. That's not what you said. But in Asian culture, in Khmer culture, that would be seen as such disrespect. And so that's just a really simple example of going, okay, maybe they're even right on that. That would be a bit disrespectful to do that. It's more important to maintain our relationship here. And I'm not going to call them out on that. We're going to move past that. I'm going to offer them grace on that and move past it. And so as we started to learn some of these cultural differences, we started to really make some, go forward leaps and bounds in getting this integration. Now, there's always going to be the hurt and, trust broken in cross-cultural business dealings because of that. But I think if you understand that their culture has a lot to offer and you embrace that, then that will be the thing that gives you the greatest breakthrough of all.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your questions. And once again, thank you so much, James. Sorry, I think we will need to call time there. It sounds like it's been a remarkable journey for you and your family, James, and much that you've learned along the way. And I think everyone, without exception, has been deeply challenged by what you've shared now. And I gather not only can we buy a pair of jeans, as Stuart has suggested, and we'll hold you to that, Stuart, but it's also possible to find out more about Outland Denim. So do look that up on the net. And you have something like 1,800 investors, from mum and dad investors all the way through to more sophisticated investors. So there's various levels that you can get involved, I'm sure, if you'd like to find out more from James.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you sitting around and listening.
Well, that does draw our time very close to finishing. Just two things to say. We do still have our small groups operating next week, and these are a wonderful opportunity to think through what James has shared and some of the big challenges, particularly if we think through what does it actually mean to seek to serve God, for, as Oliver said, as we seek to think through the questions of faith and challenging perhaps some of our comfortable assumptions. So there'll be all sorts of things that we can think about in our small groups. If you've never joined one, it's not too late, even for the last one. Let me know, or in the feedback form that will come out later this morning, you can indicate your interest. Otherwise, we will look forward to gathering together in various ways next year, and more information will come. I'm going to invite Al Stewart just to say a closing prayer.
Thanks for your time and your story, James. Inspirational, mate. We'll say a prayer. Dear God, we thank you for how you've grabbed hold of James and given him real purpose in life, and the gifts and the abilities. Thank you that you blessed this work. We pray, please, you continue to bless his family and those children that are growing up and seeing those things that will learn so much. We pray, please, you'd bless Outland Denim, that the business would be strong and grow and be scalable, so that it actually employ and help more and more people to become independent and free. Now, Father, we live in a broken world, damaged by poverty and greed. We ask, please, you might have mercy on this world, that you cared for enough to step into the world yourself. In the person of Jesus, we pray, please, that you might show each one of us the difference that we can make to love our neighbours. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Al. And once again, thanks, James. And have a great weekend, everybody. And catch up at some point.